Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle, and I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Hall. This episode is called The Playmakers. Unfortunately, we will not be joined by our other co-host, Michael Reed. He is moving on Wednesday, and he has a lot to do.
Or fortunately, know how somehow you look at it.
Yeah, who would have thought that Reed was going to procrastinate getting ready to move on Wednesday, and so now he has to do it on Monday? Who would have thought? But, of course, it was the draft time, so I can understand that. But the Burgundy Zone is a part of the Frederick Podcast Network. You can find out more by going to www.listenfrederick.com. We're going to be joined here by our first guest here momentarily. But until we do, Hall, we haven't recorded since the first round. We were all kind of, I know I was, shocked with the Emmanuel Forbes pick over Christian Gonzalez. Now that the draft is finally complete, they got Emmanuel Forbes in the first round. The second round at 47, they go get Jartavius Quan Martin, who is a cornerback / safety out of Illinois, which was a talented defensive back group. Then after that, they get Ricky Stromberg, the center from Arkansas. Braden Daniels in the fourth round. Then in the fifth round, they go get KJ Henry, who slipped all the way to the fifth round. They get their edge guy there. And then after that, that's when they go get Chris Rodriguez, a.k.a. the truck, as I like to call them. Then after Chris Rodriguez is when they finished it up with Andre Jones, who everyone knows was absolutely fantastic video. And then KJ Henry's dad, of course, being a Redskins fan, was absolutely awesome. But now we are joined by our first guest of the episode, Mr. Ryan Fowler of the Draft Network. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Ryan. How are you doing, brother? Oh, looks like you're muted, brother. Try to get that figured out. We got you. Don't worry about it. But Hall, real quick until Ryan gets his mic up. What was your most favorite pick of the draft?
Definitely had a couple favorites, but I would say that my favorite guy. I mean, I'm gonna take the low-bearing fruit. It's gonna be Emmanuel Forbes, the first-round pick.
Of course.
I know, but look, only because for a team that's been lacking in the turnovers on the defensive side of the ball for the past couple of years. Basically since Rivera's been here in Del Rio. A guy like Emmanuel Forbes that can take the ball away, flip the field for you. On an offense that's also been struggling over the past couple of years. Field position is going to be key this year. I think that Forbes is going to help contribute to that.
Yes, he will. And look, we have a great episode lined up for you guys. We got two fantastic guests here. And Ryan Fowler, are you there, brother? No, I still muted. Which microphone are you using? Yeah, I can't hear anything out of you. Hold on. Try again another one. For me, I'm gonna have to go with Jartavius Martin, Quan. I think this dude is legit. After watching his film, I was kind of surprised by the move myself, but I think this kid is really good. At 5'11", 194 pounds, he almost reminds me of Cameron Curl, the way that he plays, not in the way that essentially how he goes out and executes on the field, more so just being the leader on that defense and being the guy who cleans up everything, kind of like Cameron Curl does. So his defense makes everything kind of mesh and gel together. I saw one play where Sidney Brown misses a tackle, and then all of a sudden here comes Quan to come up and clean up for him. So you always love to see that. And I think Quan was a team barber for Illinois. So you know that, look, I have no hair, but whoever guys on the team that do, I'm sure that they're really receptive of that. Ryan, do we have you now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, my man.
Okay.
Whew, third time's a charm, Ryan.
I'm unplugging this Yeti mic. Too much technology going on.
I got you. Hey, first question for you without going into detail because we have things structured a certain way. But quite simply, just overall looking at this draft and the undrafted free agents that they signed today, did Washington get better?
Yes, they did. I absolutely love their draft. I really do. And bottom line, guys, I am so happy that Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera stuck to their board. Every board across the league is different, but they got their guys. And I remember a couple months ago, I came on with you guys, and you guys asked me as far as who could be the Jahan Dotson of this year's draft, as far as an early day 2 guy that could go day 1. And I said Emmanuel Forbes, and I'm extremely happy that now I know the immediate knee-jerk reaction was, Christian Gonzalez is there. Now, for me, he was my CB1 because I thought he was the most refined cover corner and man in end zone. I think he's going to be darn good in New England. But you heard Ron and you heard Martin talk about they wanted a guy that prioritize creating that turnover margin. And there is not a single guy in this class, I don't care from anywhere, even in the last couple drafts, that is going to help you get the ball back for your offense than Emmanuel Forbes. And the biggest thing for me with that pick, guys, is how is he away from getting interceptions? What is he doing when he isn't able to tip the ball in the air or getting picks? Because we know who Trayvon Diggs is. And the guy's a complete turnstile when he's not picking off footballs. That's not Emmanuel Forbes. He can compete in the run game. I know he's 165, but you turn on the tape, TFLs, corners don't have a lot of those. His ability to not just blow up a screen, but pick off a screen. He understands what he's looking at. He's communicating inside to Cody Barton. He's looking back to Cam Curl. All of those things from you with Emmanuel Forbes and 4.3 speed with length and the ball skills, I'm all the way in.
Yeah, 100% agree. And jumping around too, I know a lot of people said that this was a reach pick and he went a little bit earlier than a lot of people expected. But like you said, they stuck to their board and he dropped into their lap at 47. They took Quan Martin, Jatavius Martin, Quan Martin. Yeah. Just talk a little bit about him and what he's going to bring to the team.
44-inch vertical, by the way.
Yes, extremely explosive. Well, like 11-1 broad or something stupid.
11-1. Disgusting,
yes.
Ryan.
Just he's an explosive athlete that, guys, I know he's not built in that Sean Taylor mold, but you know I love those physical type of ball players. We all do. And he's someone that is not just will come downhill and blow your chin strap off, but he's also a sound tackler in space. And what I appreciated him at Illinois, and especially projecting him to the NFL, is we know that NFL offenses want to move their guys, the premier guys on the outside, to try to get free releases at nickel. You're not going to get a free release with Quan Martin, whether you want to play him in that press man, the contact window, or play him off, or you want to show some unique looks to where he's pressed at the line of scrimmage and he's rolling back and you're showing some unique cover 3 looks because he can run with your tight end up the seam and be a tight end eraser. And you got Derek Forrest if you want to bring him in the box. I just mentioned Cam Curl. You got more bodies on the outside. Versatility remains king. And when you have a ball player that's not just a good football player, but a good athlete, because sometimes just because you're a good athlete doesn't mean you're a good football player. He checks a lot of those boxes, and you have to get a guy at nickel that can not just compete, but produce. And I know Danny Johnson's back. We'll see what Kendall Fuller and his role is. We know he was best at nickel. But Quan Martin, I would not be surprised. Obviously, he starts right away, and he is a major, major producer for this defense.
Yeah, and I did a film breakdown on him on Twitter over the weekend. You can go and search at the Burgundy Zone, just search for Tre'Davious Martin. And my most favorite play of him is when he's coming up to line of scrimmage. It's a run play. It's a huge gashing run play. After running before the snap, then has to track down the running back and is able to do that, just showcasing his speed and effort. Absolutely just love that play from him. It's my favorite one. But the next pick was Ricky Stromberg in the 3rd round, and this was at 97, very far in the comp pick in the 3rd round. This kind of confused everybody. So what is your expectation of Ricky Stromberg? Do you think that he's going to be center for this football team, and do you expect him to start?
I don't expect him to start right away, but he is somebody that rose a ton in the pre-draft process. He was looked upon as a mid to late day 3 guy just a couple months ago, but from what I was told, he was overwhelmingly impressive as far as getting up on the whiteboard and understanding what he's looking from a defensive perspective, because you bring him into this Washington offense and you don't want Sam Howell looking at the front 4. You want him focused on the corners and on the safeties and what they're showing you. So Ricky at Arkansas, SEC experience. Now there's some technical deficiencies in his game as far as he plays a little bit too far over his feet at times. I want to see him use his feet just a little bit more and sink in that anchor. But he's someone that understands IDs, stunts, and blitzers. He plays with leverage. I mentioned the SEC experience. And I love guys that win above the shoulders before they ever win with the physical intangibles that they have. And I know Tyler Larson's in the building and Nick Gates. I expect Nick to compete with Chase right away to start, but who knows what the future is with Chase Roulier.
True.
But the bottom line, guys, we talk about all the time with guys that can compete for snaps. Don't care who you are. You have to compete, because 500 football and sub 500 football, whatever they've been doing, is not good enough. The talent in the building is there. Ricky Stromberg is a guy that I'm glad he went in the top 100. He deserved to go in the top 100. He's going to compete his tail off to potentially start. And guys, and Kyle, I know you said as far as expecting to start, I don't expect him to start right away, but I would not be surprised that he does.
Yeah, and jumping back to Emmanuel Forbes, because you mentioned Kendall Fuller. Obviously, he's the outside corner right now. He's played a lot of slot corner throughout his career. You're going to obviously project Forbes to play on the outside. Do you think that projecting forward that Kendall Fuller could possibly be a cap casualty, just like based on how much you're gonna save post June 1st?
Yeah, I absolutely do. You got to get younger on the outside. I appreciate what Kendall's done. Ups and downs with Kendall really in this, especially his second stint in Washington, but you're getting younger athletes within the secondary. There are so many young ball players in this defense. And really, this is an ad, especially even the guy like bringing in Cameron Dantzler from Minnesota to open the eyes of Benjamin St-Juste, because we're moving into year 3 with you, big fella. We got to get more from you. You got to stay in the football field. You have all the tools to be a CB1 in the NFL, but we have to see that performance ceiling. Year 3 is going to be huge for him. Kendall would not be surprised if he's not here in week 1 with Emmanuel and Benjamin starting opposite of each other, and then Quan inside and Danny Johnson as that CB4, Cameron Dantzler right there as well. And then obviously a couple guys, even as UDFA, we can talk about later as far as potentially a guy that can play. Rashad Wildgoose as well, still in the building too. So there's some names, in Christian Holmes, of course, but we'll see the future with Christian.
Absolutely. And then in the 4th round, the Commanders selected Braden Daniels, the tackle from Utah, tackle/guard. He's played all over the offensive line, 6'4", 297 pounds. Supposedly, from Tony Pauline, he weighed 307 at his pro day, which makes you feel a lot better because his weight has been talked about a lot with Emmanuel Forbes. Talk to us about Braden Daniels, because the one word that I would to describe his tape that I've seen is kind of chaotic.
Yeah, I would say he meets your athletic intangibles, and I think you watch him sometimes at tackle. He oversets a ton, and then he has to retrace his steps and work back up in the pocket. But he has the athleticism to do so. Yeah. So you get him in the building as a ball of clay that obviously we know he has those intangibles to play in the inside as well at guard. But you work with him and you slowly refine that technique. And I think you got a starter on your hands, because we know Washington loves athletes. This is also an ad, guys. Sam Cosmi. Open your eyes. This kid can play. Absolutely. Utah pumps out talent every year. It goes extremely overlooked every single season because the East Coast folks don't stay up long enough to watch Pac-12 football. Utah's got some studs. They got some studs every year. And Braden Daniels, again, not the most technically refined guy in this class. I would agree as far as his tape is chaotic at times, but can play a multitude of positions for you, meet your athletic intangibles, and he's just a guy that's not scheme dependent as well. He's not just a gap guy. He's not just a zone guy. Eric Bieniemy, we know, is going to do a lot of different things and ask a lot of different stuff from his offensive linemen, and Braden Daniels can do that for you.
Yeah, and the 5th round pick, the edge rusher out of Clemson. Obviously, with them not picking up Chase Young's 5th-year option, a lot of people speculated that they would go edge rusher a little bit earlier than the 5th round. They get KJ Henry from Clemson. I heard his interview on the Junkies this morning. Seems like a really good kid. I know a lot of people say his character off the field is just the highest of the highest, which is fits what Ron Rivera likes and loves in his players. So what is he going to bring to this team as well?
Yeah, KJ down at the Senior Bowl, someone that really got overlooked inside this Clemson front 7. I mean, Jeremiah Trotter, junior linebackers, and Barrett Carter, they're going to be drafted next year. Brian Bazee, Miles Murphy, Xavier Thomas. Who's this KJ Henry kid, right? And this is a guy that, again, the athletic intangibles, they're there. But what I love about KJ is his ability to win with power, win with speed, and not the most elite as far as an edge setter, but in this defense, to push Montez and Chase, to push guys like William Bradley King and James Smith-Williams, because we know Shaka Toney's out for the entire year. We may not ever see him in the Burgundy Gold again. Who knows, even though he showed some flashes, especially last year. KJ Henry, Power 5 experience, ACC, kid that's going to take his lunch pail to work every day. And if you're not working, he is. I promise you that from getting to know KJ. And the intangibles that he has off the edge, I want to see him work a little bit more in the run game, but as a potential DPR, again, he lives working to the inside of tackles, developing the outside, that ankle flexion he has, improving his athleticism and pass rush repertoire. That's, in my mind, advanced. It's not extremely elite, but is advanced among the guys in this class, because we see edge rushers that are young always come into the league and try to consistently win with their burst to the outside. KJ Henry's going to come in and compete for snaps right away, as he should, and he has the potential to steal somebody's spot. Absolutely.
All right, now, Ryan, to wrap this up, I only have a couple more questions for you, but Eric Bieniemy got one of his first toys, I feel like, in Christopher the Truck Rodriguez. Some of his tape that I watched, he lined up at fullback at times, taking the handoff, and actually was a pretty good blocker in passing sets. What is your expectation with Chris Rodriguez, and do you expect him to make a roster and see some time?
Yeah, so that day 3 bucket, right, was where I expected them to go. I expected maybe a little guy with some juice, a little bit more, maybe some special teams pop. But this tells me potentially, guys, that he could be that RB2 from a carries perspective behind B-Rob, just specifically because what I've been told as far as how they're going to use Antonio Gibson in space. And I know Jonathan Williams is still on the roster, but Chris Rodriguez didn't play the first 4 games this year, still rushed for nearly 1,000 yards, SEC experience, tough as nails. Another guy that Washington got from the Senior Bowl, just downhill thumper. And I don't want to pigeonhole him into the Peyton Barber role. We always talk about this downhill thumper. It's just, he's Peyton Barber. He's not Peyton Barber. But the success that he has at another guy, 210 plus pounds to back up B-Rob. You never know as far as injuries or what could happen. Knock on wood. We obviously know what happened to Brian last year. That was unexpected. It's unfortunate, but now he's healthy and ready to go. But I would not be surprised if he has a substantial role in this offense as a guy that can get you potentially 7 to 10 carries a game, to be that big guy you want to take into the alley with you as we move forward into the January months and December and FedEx Field when it starts to get cold. So have fun tackling 600 pounds of man and B-Rob, Gibson, and Rodriguez as we get to those winter months.
Absolutely. He's an absolute truck. Last question I have for you, Ryan. What does this draft class say about Sam Howell, about Chase Young, and Montez Sweat? It was speculated that Young and Sweat could be traded during this draft, and they weren't. So what does it say about those 3 players?
Yeah, I think you looked at KJ Henry, and I think you look at Andre Jones. And I know Andre, late 7th round, you don't expect too much from him, but someone that I really like in this class, guys. A lot of length, some twitch to him from Louisiana Lafayette, the 2nd straight year that Washington's taken that guy out of Louisiana Lafayette, obviously taking Percy last year. But especially with those edge guys, with Chase and Montez was good in 2022. But I just love the approach that Martin Mayhew has looked at this roster and said, I have my guys, I have my pillars, but now we're building depth, and we're not just building depth, but we can get guys that can compete with the starters as well. Now, we didn't touch tight end. We didn't touch a guy like at receiver. We don't need to go there, but you added a running back, you added edge guys, you didn't touch linebacker, you add more corners. That is a spot where they filled a multitude of positions, even offensive line. Talked about Braden Daniels doing multiple things for you. Sam Howell remains to be seen as far as just what that performance ceiling is. But guys, we know this as far as the offensive playmakers we have on this roster. Now you get another guy in Chris Rodriguez. We'll see what happens as far as guys that potentially get cut before camp. We saw the addition of John Ridgeway last year after Dallas added him, what he did for this defense. So I'm excited for Sam, and then for Chase and Montez specifically, getting more edge rushers in the building that push these guys. They have got to live up to expectation, not just individually. I don't want to see just 90 or 99 on the field. I want to see both, because we know we're going to get from Deron and John. 90 and 99 have to be productive as a duo, an elite as a duo, or one or both of them may not be here next year. Bottom line.
You're absolutely right, Ryan. Unfortunately, that is the fact of the matter. I can't thank you enough for being able to come on here and talk about the draft class with your great knowledge that you have. It's always a pleasure, and you called the Emmanuel Forbes pick. Credit to you, sir.
Yes.
I can't wait to see him play, fellas. Can't wait to see him play.
Me either, brother. Have a good night, Ryan. I can't thank you enough as always.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Ryan Fowler of the Draft Network. Absolutely fantastic stuff. I love that he loved the draft class. But now we are going to be joined by our next guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ian Cummings, like the engine. He's a diesel power all the way. What's up, brother? How you doing, Ian?
Doing good. You're hyping me up too much, man. Like, glad to be talking with you guys, though. It's been a busy week, been a hectic week, but we're decompressing now. So,
and this is a power episode, man. We just talked to Ryan, and now we're going to talk to you, Ian. Obviously, you're one of the more knowledgeable guys around the draft class, and so you say I'll talk you up too much, but I'm going to throw the heater at you right in your face to start this off. Andre Jones, we selected him in the 7th round. Was there good tape on him? Because his video, my wife essentially absolutely loved the video of him being obviously drafted by the Commanders and crying. It really touched a lot of people. Talk to you about Andre Jones and what is Washington getting?
Yeah, I think what you're getting is I don't want to talk it up. I don't want to overhype it, right? You're probably at that point in the draft, you're getting a rotational guy, right. But I do think he has some upside. I don't think he's an elite athlete, but there are flashes on tape, right? I think For me, it's like tools. He hasn't converted on it consistently, but he does have tools. I mean, around 6'4", 249, I want to say, with over 34-inch arms. So a very appealing size profile when you look at that length, right? He doesn't convert it to power as often as you'd expect, right? You want to see a little more explosiveness both in his legs and in his upper body when he's approaching contact. But I do think, as a rotational guy who's got experience, is going to be a good locker room addition. He was a sixth-year senior at Louisiana, a very consistent contributor there. So, I think right now it's a matter of traits versus conversion. The conversion isn't quite there yet. I don't know at this point if it's ever going to get there, being an older rookie. But hey, those traits alone are valuable to have in that rotation. So, and I think it'll help him. It'll serve him well in run defense. Especially being able to outreach guys and acquire leverage. And he's got a good foot speed too when attacking blocks and kind of adjusting his angles. So, I think there is some appeal there. I think the upside is a little limited, but there is some measured developmental growth potential.
And before I go next, Hall, real quick, I just want to ask you, Ian, do you have our listed of the undrafted free agents that we signed?
I've seen a few. Mitchell Tinsley from Penn State was one.
Don't go yet. Don't go. Let Hall go. I'm going to ask you.
All right. Yeah, I've seen a few. I need to refresh in the full list. But yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. So Washington's first round pick was Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. I know a lot of people, if you were looking at Twitter, checking Commanders Twitter, they were up in arms because Christian Gonzalez seemingly almost fell into their lap. I know that was a lot of people's cornerback number one in this draft. It's kind of a two-part question. My first question is, how did you have them ranked as far as Gonzalez, Forbes on your list, on your board? And my second question is, how is Forbes going to fit into this defense as far as a guy that's a ball hawk or turnover machine and definitely a need for this Commanders defense?
Yeah, so for me it was Gonzalez CB1. I had Devin Witherspoon CB2, Deonte Banks CB3. Forbes was a little farther down my board. He was around the top 50 range though. But here's the thing: I'm a media scout. They're NFL scouts, right? So if any time an NFL team picks a player higher than I expected, right? Everyone has different boards, right? So it's not my place to scoff at that, right? There are reasons to have Forbes that high. I think the explosiveness, the speed, the ball production, like you said, he broke the CFP record for pick sixes in a career, right? So that has to account for something, right? Being able to, and it's a culmination of things. He's very instinctive, right? He's got great eyes. He's got great processing ability. He can jump routes, and then he's got that really, really dynamic speed and explosiveness coming downhill to cover that ground and then make the play on the ball. I think especially the twitchiness as well to get himself in the right positioning too. It's all very appealing for him. What kind of diluted his grade for me? Obviously, it's going to be obvious, right? The size, 166 pounds, right? So definitely a little bit lighter. And, he plays bigger than that, to be fair. I do think physicality, like the want to, is not an issue for him. But I do question how the play strength is going to convert at the next level, because it does show up as an issue at times when he has to hand fight at the line, or, when he has to deconstruct blocks and run supports. So, I think, when you're looking for a playmaker, right? And I did read somewhere that the Commanders wanted a guy with that my ball mentality, right? A guy who can actually find the ball in the air and convert. And Deonte Banks is not quite that guy yet, right? But then at the same time, you also want a guy who plays physical. And I do think Forbes is a little, relative to his frame, has more of that physicality to him than Christian Gonzalez. Gonzalez is definitely a smooth athlete who wins with his feet first, and he can be physical, but Forbes kind of brings more of that competitive chip that you would want. So, I can see why they would prefer it. But for me personally, I think it's a little bit easier to kind of develop the ball skills and the ball tracking in a uber physical guy like Deonte Banks, who does have great press abilities at the line, than add so much mass to a frame that really needs it in Forbes. I really question how it's going to translate. But the ball production, the playmaking ability, that's indisputable. And I think that's really going to help that defense with the turnover production at least.
Ian, just to piggyback off that really quick, do you think that Emmanuel Forbes' game film was a first-round grade, but the size is what took him out of it?
It was close. It would be close to a first round grade. I don't know if it would be a bona fide first round grade, but I think the size was the biggest concern for me. Like if he was 180, 185, right, then, I'm a little more comfortable taking him that high. I think, the 166 is just such an outlier. It's tough. Like you see player comps to guys like Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, right? But even he was almost 20 pounds heavier coming out, right? So it's a big adjustment to make. And it's really, almost similar to Kalijah Kancey, right? Who's such a good player on the film. The athleticism isn't a concern. but 6'2", 280 around, like under 31 inch arms. Like, it's such an outlier. It is going to be tough to translate. So, that gives me apprehension, right? But I think you make a good point. If you take the size out of it, I do think he's a very good player. I just, especially in that scheme where it's a lot of 4-man rushing, a lot of press man at the line, that's a little concerning to me. But, I do think he's a good player outside of that.
I got you, man. You're the man, dude. Now I want to have you the list of the undrafted free agents that we signed today: Kazmir Allen, Zion Bowens, Mason Brooks, Tim DeMorat, the quarterback, Xavier Henderson, Josh Pryor, Jalen Sample, Kendall Smith, DJ Sturgis, Mitch Tinsley, Bryson Tremaine, and then Nick Whiteside. What do you think of that list?
Yeah, a few names that stand out to me. I didn't get to watch all of them, but a few names that did stand out to me. And Mitchell Tinsley is the first one. He's going to be a camp star, I think.
Okay.
We saw him at the Shrine Bowl, and he was routing guys up. I mean, he came in and he was just routing guys up, just separating. Really good release work, work at the stem, very good hip sync and suddenness in his feet. He's around 6 foot, 200, over 32 inch arms too. So he's got really good size, really good reach, very good run after catch threat. That was one of the stronger elements of his profile. Going back to Western Kentucky, I mean, he's dense, he's compact, he's got contact balance. And then he came to Penn State. He actually took Jahan Dotson's number 5 at Kent State. Little fun fact there. But he's got route running ability. He's got ability at the catch point, extending beyond his frame, and he's a good rack threat. I think he's the full package in that 3-level framework. Not elite explosiveness and speed, but a guy who can really be a solid rotational guy. So I expect him to. I think he's going to make some plays in camp, and I think he might earn a roster spot. But beyond that, Kaz Allen from UCLA. Versatile. He can get in the ball in motion. He's a receiving back with some versatility there, but he's also got legit game-breaking speed, right? So he's a guy that if you get him the ball in space, he can really make it happen. Could even be a return asset for you. Mason Brooks, he also started his career at Western Kentucky before going to Ole Miss, but he back to his Western Kentucky days too. I mean, he's a guy who's got really good arm length, really good power in his punches. I mean, there were some really eye-catching reps going back to that tape where, he'll extend fully and he will knock the guy back. He'll disrupt his center of gravity. And so you'd love to see that knockback power in guys. And I think he could be a guard, he could be a tackle. He's not an elite athlete. He's a little clunky with his feet. So I think guard might be where he ends up, but he could be a good depth option there, I think, with that knockback power. And then Tim DeMorat, incredibly productive quarterback at the FCS level. I got to speak with him at the Shrine Bowl. Very intelligent. He's got a great head on his shoulders. I think he's actually a solid athlete too. There was one play at the Shrine Bowl where he was scrambling out to the left and he got down the field. And once he turns on the jets, like, oh, this guy's got some mobility to him, not more than you would expect. So, I think he's a guy who could maybe, I think the Commanders, they have Sam Howell. They got Jacoby Brissett. Is DeMorat the third quarterback or is there another guy in there?
It'd be Jake Fromm.
Jake Fromm. Okay. Yeah, I do think DeMorat might be able to beat out Jake Fromm. Now that's partly a lack of endorsement for Fromm on my part. I think DeMorat has enough tools.
Respect Georgia, Ian.
I know. I got to. The
Tally
champions,
Roseman's
right?
going to pick him up as soon as we let him go.
Exactly. But yeah, no, for real. I think DeMorat. I'm giving DeMorat the credit now. I think he has the tools. I think he has enough in his tank to maybe challenge for that spot.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought that this would be a draft where they got a lot of some tools for Eric Bieniemy, the new offensive coordinator for Washington. They didn't go offense till the 3rd round. They picked Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas center. What does he bring to the table, and what was your grade on him pre-draft?
Yeah, he might end up being your starting center. I was a fan of his. He was just outside my top 100. Now, in that range, a lot of guys stacked up for me. It was tough to rank those guys, but man, Ricky Stromberg, I do really like the traits that he has. I think he had a 5.23 40-yard dash. I want to say he had a 32.5-inch vertical, so he's very good. He had
a higher vertical than Kelly Ringo.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
That's some good draft trivia right there, man. That's fun. But no, for real. Stromberg is and I think he's around 6'4", 6'5", around 300 pounds, right? So he's a very well-sized, really well put together guy, and he didn't get a ton of buzz throughout the entire cycle, but I had him graded higher than Luke Weipler, who got some day 2 hype for a good part of it there. So, I think with Stromberg, first things first, I mean, he's smart, he's intelligent, he can process stunts, he can, kind of call out protections too. So you like to have that from your center, multiple years of starting experience. But beyond that too, his testing numbers kind of indicate explosive off the line. He gets off quick. He can acquire leverage. He's got a wrestling background too, so that helps with that. But, also very flexible when he's, flipping his hips to seal off lanes and stuff like that, recovery and pass protection. I think he's a very solid player. He can anchor. I think he's, a really high floor guy who could come in and be that starter. I think they have Nick Gates as the veteran in there, but long term, I really think Stromberg, if he can just keep honing his frame a little bit, because he's a little bit lean for his size, a little bit more NFL strength. I think he could be a very good player because he's got the athleticism, he's got the intangibles, and that's a complete skill set.
Yeah, I think the biggest knock on him is he just doesn't have any facial hair yet. We just got to get that going.
Exactly. Once you get that, you're golden. You're
Right.
golden.
All right, now my next question for you, sir. Overall, NFL in the whole draft in itself, the biggest steal in the draft, you feel?
That's a tough question, man.
I know.
That is a tough question. I got to think to the cornerbacks. There were a lot of cornerbacks who fell in the draft, and there were a few that were on day 3 that I would have taken on day 2. I think Corey Trice going to the
Dude,
Pittsburgh
are you
Steelers.
serious?
Was that going to be your top option?
Yeah, dude, it really was. The 7th rounder to the Steelers, I thought that was huge for them.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, he was a guy that I was kind of hoping Washington would get because, he's got that press skill set, 6'3", 206, over 32-inch arms. The dude is insanely physical at the line. I mean, he will rocket that 2-hand jam at you, and he can be a little undisciplined with that. You want to be patient, right? But, again, this guy is not afraid to impose his physicality. And then, having that size, that play strength is very valuable. But then for his size, 6'3", 206, I mean, this guy's fluid. I mean, he flips his hips off the line just like that. Very easy transitioner. He's got good burst, good long speed as well. I think he can channel that explosiveness a little bit better than he does right now. I think his testing burst is better than his on-field burst. But again, you're working with a ton of physical tools here. Very natural playmaker at the catch point who can contort. He can get his hands in the right spot. And then he's got good eyes in zone too, where he can peel off and undercut routes too. So, big fan of his overall profile. I think medicals played a part in his fall. He had a knee injury in his history, so that may have helped contribute to his fall to round 7. But I was like, if this guy makes it to the undrafted pool, like circle this guy, underline, circle, bold, whatever you have to do, because he is the real deal. And so I think the Steelers getting him in round 7, locking him down, even with that injury, he proved that he could come back to 100% in 2022. So I think there's reason to be optimistic. He was my biggest steal. There were a few others out there, but I think that's the one that comes to mind for me.
Right. And kind of on the flip side of that, what was the one pick where you kind of scratched your head and you didn't really see the vision of what that team was doing at that point in time?
Yeah. That's a tough one too. I mean, you guys know I love to sit on the fence, right? I love to, because I mean, every team's board is different. Every team has a reason for picking a guy at a certain spot.
So let me flip it up on this then. So what was the guy that went in the first round that you thought could have went later? They could have got more value if the team. Sorry. What was the pick that you thought in the first round that they could have got maybe a little bit more later in the second round and got a little bit more better value?
I'm going to take a guess. Mozzie Smith.
Actually, Mozzie Smith, here's the thing with Mozzie Smith. I'm sorry, Kyle. I mean, you try and get a definitive answer out of me. Like it's not going to happen. I can't. That's part of a knock on me. But I think Mozzie Smith was a little lower on my board. Now, I think, I wish I'd updated his grades sooner in the cycle because he would have scored a little higher for me than I ended up slotting him, but he was top 50 guy for me at the very end, top 75, top 50. So maybe a little rich in round 1. But again, I think, it depends on how the team's going to use him. I think for, Dallas in particular, getting a nose tackle like that to help with the alignment flexibility, he's a guy who can hold up double teams too, but he's got the independent pass rushing upside as well. I think there's a reason to get that guy because of how guys can play off of him, right? Will McDonald to the Jets is another one that I'll throw out there where I didn't quite see it at the time. Because the Jets, they traditionally, under Robert Saleh have gone kind of like the Washington 4-man fronts. I wasn't sure if they had the personnel for it. But you hear Saleh talking to McDonald, and he's saying, hey, we're going to get you in that wide 9 stance. So way outside the tackle where he can use his explosiveness and bend to really turn the arc and just give tackles fits, man. So I think as long as they had the vision for that, that can be worth it for sure. So there weren't a ton of round 1 that was like, I wouldn't have done that. Round 2, day 2, maybe a few. Brenton Strange, the Jaguars. I liked the player for sure on day 3. Thought that was a little rich for him, and I think the Jaguars just have so many weapons. I'm not sure how he's going to get the snaps to warrant that selection. I think that might have been a little bit of a reach. Broderick Jones to the Lions, but that again, I mean, he's 6'5", 330, 35-inch arms. He's built to be a nose tackle, right, and kind of encumber double teams. So I can see it from a personnel standpoint. But he was, just a little bit of a reach on my board. But overall, most of the picks, I think you can at least legitimize them. You can at least rationalize it. There were just a few that stood out.
I got you. Now, Ian, to wrap this up, I only have a couple more questions for you. But first off, we got to be selfish. Bring it back to
Hold
Washington.
on, let me get one more before you go. My
All
bad,
right.
because I just thought of this.
I'll be rapid
What did you
fire.
think of DeJuan Jones slipping out down to
Damn
the, I think, fourth round?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he played very well the first day of the Senior Bowl, then sat out the rest of the Senior Bowl. I think Scott's kind of were rubbed the wrong way by that. And then you heard that his demeanor at his pro day rubbed people the wrong way. So I think maybe that was a case of just kind of sitting on his laurels a little too soon in the pre-draft process, because he did fall a little bit. But he ended up going to a good spot, I think, as that backup right tackle behind Jack Conklin. And then, Conklin, his long-term future a little unclear. So maybe he slides in down the road. But yeah, I think that was just a case of the pre-draft process hurting him a bit.
I got you. Now, to wrap this up, Ian, only a couple more. But what was your favorite pick from Washington?
From Washington, Stromberg is up there. Jartavius Martin was, a tad bit of a reach on my board personally, but again, I can see it because he is a very physical, very, very explosive defender with slot capabilities. I really like the vision there. He's got playmaking ability. I think that, that versatility that he provides, he could be the completing piece for that secondary. When you look at, having Emmanuel Forbes, Kendall Fuller, you got Derek Forrest and Cameron Curl as the safeties. I think it's a really versatile secondary. All you really need was that super dynamic, hyper dynamic playmaker in both phases. I think Quan Martin can definitely be that guy. I do think there's some room for refinement. There are times when he needs to pass off and carry in zone and he doesn't quite do it. I do think there's some missed tackles coming downhill. He can take better angles, but I do think you're working with phenomenal tools in that department. Braden Daniels was a fun one for me. I think he can project very well at guard, very athletic. He's got that natural leverage proportional length combo that I like. And I'm trying to think. Let me pull up their draft real quick because I'm trying to think. KJ Henry was another fun one. I think he'll be a good rotational defensive end. I wish they'd addressed defensive end earlier because it is so uncertain for the future. Maybe, I don't think KJ Henry has the upside to be that guy either. But again, if you're looking for a third edge, quality depth, he can be that guy too. So those are a few. Who was their last pick? I'm trying to remember.
What's it called?
That was
Andre Johns.
Yeah, and then Chris Rodriguez was the one before that. That was another solid one. I would have preferred a guy with more receiving upside, but again, I can see it.
That's what I was looking forward to. I thought they would go like more of the Jerick McKinnon type of back.
Yeah, like Keaton Mitchell. If you get him there, that would have been I would have loved that.
Absolutely. Now, Ian, my last question for you. I unfortunately have to do this, but I know it's going to be hard for you to do this. Probably have 30 prospects on your mind about this. But in the overall draft, what was the best fit for player and team? But so let's make it more easy for you in the first 2 rounds.
First 2 rounds for player and team. I could go with the cliche one, Anthony Richardson to the Colts.
Okay.
I thought that was a perfect fit for him. I think that was exactly where he needed to land to maximize his skill set with Shane Steichen. He's the offensive mind who knows how to really magnify those tools. Round 2, one that stands out to me is Jaden Reed for the Packers. I think for Jordan Love, especially being a young quarterback, they really needed a guy because they got Christian Watson, who's that dynamic deep threat, right? They have Romeo Doubs, but, I really think they needed a reliable separator who can win at the catch point, just to be that target funnel for you, but can also separate and stretch the field vertically independently on his own. I think Jaden Reed provided a lot of that. I think he contrasts that skill set really well. He's not always what you expect from the Packers. They tend to like bigger, more athletic guys, but Reed, that smaller, shiftier route runner, separator, who's got 3-level utility. I thought that was a really fun fit. Rashee Rice to the Chiefs. I'm excited for that one once he's healthy. Another explosive, twitchy guy at the line, but one of the best catchers of football. He's super instinctive, rising vertically and contorting for the ball. He's an alpha at the catch point against those DBs, but he's also got really good rack utility too. So I think the different ways that they can use him, very exciting. So those are a few. I bet if I went down the line, I could name more, but we'd be here for a long time. So those are a few. I'm excited to see how this class as a whole pans out because I think there were a lot of fun team player fits in day 2, day 3, all across the board.
I totally agree with you. Now, last question I have for you. It's quite simple, really. Did Washington get better?
I think they did. I think the question is how much better, and the question is what is the ceiling with this group? Part of me wished that the ceiling for this draft class was a little bit higher. Again, like I said, getting a running back with receiving upside would have been nice. Getting an edge a little bit earlier, I think. Isaiah McGuire on day 3 would have been a guy that I would have targeted for them because I think, again, higher athletic tools. He's actually got really good bend, really good hand usage too. So, I think especially with Montez Sweat and Chase Young, both of their futures long-term a little unclear. Edge is not a position that you want to neglect, right? So, I would have addressed that a little bit sooner. I think that the secondary additions have a lot of potential, right? But Emmanuel Forbes, how can his size hold up? Jartavius Martin, can he continue to quell down the volatility in his game a little bit and truly maximize his skill set. So, I think there's questions that are left unanswered by this group. I do think they got better. The question is, in the NFC, which, is fairly wide open right now. I think, it's you look at the quarterback comparison anyway from conference to conference, it's not even a comparison too. So, I think Washington, especially with Ron Rivera, he's had a few years, new regime now, new ownership. You really need to hit the ground running, I think, if you want to stay in charge. So, I do question it. I think there's a lack of security with this group, but I do think, if they use them the right way, put them in the position to succeed, it can happen. I just question. There's a few hangups for me, like Forbes size. We'll see what happens. But I'll say they got better. The question is just how much.
I love that response, Ian. I truly do, and I always appreciate your time and being able to break down this draft for us. Your intellect, your opinion is very valuable. I really do appreciate all the time that you give us, Ian. I hope you have a good week. I know you're going to be very busy, sir. I know you're already started on 2024.
Yeah, for sure. I'll hit a vacation at some point. We'll try and fit it in.
At some point,
always,
maybe 2026, Ian.
Maybe we'll see. Maybe if we get to that point. I always enjoy talking with you guys.
Appreciate you, Ian.
Appreciate
have a good
it,
night,
man.
brother.
Yeah, you too.
All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Ian Cummings. I feel so bad I made him wait for so long. I really do appreciate it because we had a time delay going on. I do feel bad for doing that to Ian. But no, let's get on to our fan questions to wrap up this episode to talk about this draft class. This question is from the Colonel Hall. How happy is everyone that we avoided Will Levis?
I think happy is an understatement.
Yeah, dude, so happy.
I think the only people that aren't happy are the local radio, a couple of local radio guys, just because that would be a storyline they could talk about throughout the whole summer. It's would probably cause chaos as far as like, I thought they were so invested in Sam Howell. Why did they draft a quarterback? So fan base, ecstatic. Local radio guys that wanted them to draft a quarterback because they pray for like mayhem in Washington, not so much.
Yeah, I'm very happy just for the fact that we don't have to deal with it, the constant questions and everything. I'm glad that Howell has the full confidence behind him. He didn't need any questions to be roused up to any ones that already did. Now, the next question from the Colonel. From each of your hosts, which one was your biggest surprise from the Commanders draft? For me, I'll say it was Emmanuel Forbes. Point blank, I think it's pretty easy to say that at this point based on my reaction just because of Gonzo being there. I thought it was a shoe-in, but Hall, I think that you kind of explained it perfectly to me and kind of breaking it down as to why they picked Emmanuel Forbes over Christian Gonzalez. I think the point in saying that Christian Gonzalez's tape versus the SEC teams was not as good as it was against the Pac-12 teams. And that's why they put Forbes over it, because Forbes plays in the SEC all the time and is producing these types of numbers. And then when Gonzalez plays these SEC teams, he's not putting up the same sort of game tape. So I think that you broke it down perfectly, and that probably was the biggest difference in it all. And I appreciate you explaining that to me. But for me, Colonel, I think it was Emmanuel Forbes over Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Forbes, he's been battle tested just facing all those SEC wide receivers. If you look at the receivers in the league right now, most of the top guys, they've basically come from the SEC. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, George Pickens, not a top guy, but he's a guy that's on the rise. You can keep going down the list. There's a lot of guys that Forbes is facing the SEC and held his own, even with the slight frame. So love that pick. My surprise pick, I would say it was probably Chris Rodriguez, and that's only because like I like Eric Bieniemy has like a certain role like carved out for him, and think that he can be a producer for this team in 2023. But I thought they would go more of the kind of like the scat back, kind of the receiving back, Jerick McKinnon type that can kind of run between the tackles, but also catch the ball on the flat and run some routes. But
got to be able to block well.
Yeah, but as an Antonio Gibson truther, I am psyched that they didn't go that route, because to me that symbolizes that Eric Bieniemy has a certain role carved out for Antonio Gibson and thinks that Antonio Gibson can kind of be his scat back, Jerick McKinnon, Kareem Hunt type of guy. So
and I think that's
excited for Antonio Gibson this year.
I think that's what Ryan Fowler was essentially saying earlier when we talked to him, saying that the vision for Antonio Gibson is a lot like McKinnon in that breath, and that's why they got Chris Rodriguez to take carries off of B-Rob based on how they want to use them, a.k.a. power scheme. You know what I mean? Now, the next question in the Discord chat server, thank you, Colonel. This was from Orange Crush 92, and I think this is a very good question. Hall, should you draft Washington's defense this year in fantasy?
That is a good question. I love a good fantasy football question. I would say yes. And like, I'm not gonna say they're gonna be like a top 5 type of like defensive fantasy or
No.
nothing like that. But they'll definitely get you positive points every week. Like obviously, like if Emmanuel Forbes just brings half the turnovers, a quarter of the turnovers he's had over the past couple of years in college to our team, that's obviously points for the defense. This is a defense that was top 5 in points per game allowed last year. Obviously, the schedule and the offenses they went against was kind of like meh, and they face a little tougher offenses this year, like Josh Allen, the Bills, and whatnot. But I do think that with the additions that they made, hopefully they solidified the secondary as far as adding Martin, adding Forbes on the back end. I definitely think this is going to be a defense that will definitely produce a lot of fantasy points for you this year.
Yeah, look, I've been beating this drum since the end of the season. Everyone was calling me crazy, but I wanted a lockdown corner in round one. That's just what I wanted when the season ended. I know I kind of wavered throughout this draft process just based on what I was hearing. Like I didn't know the way. I didn't think that
We
Christian
also didn't think the Bears would take Darnell Wright at like number 9 or 10, whatever it was. So that's kind of threw everything off.
Right, like we didn't think Christian Gonzalez would fall to 16
Right.
either, like Devin Witherspoon being up there. And so we didn't really know what was going to go on there. But, that was what I wanted. I wanted the lockdown corner there. Then they add Jartavius Martin on top of that after letting go of Bobby McCain. And no disrespect to Bobby, but he was picked on quite a lot last season, especially from that nickel role. And getting 2 guys, and especially Jartavius Martin being more so of the leader from the Illinois defense, this isn't a guy that's going to walk in as a deer in headlights. So I think you're getting a very confident individual and putting him in that nickel role, and then adding in Emmanuel Forbes and then forcing things to move around. I think that's a great problem to have. And so I think that is exactly where you want to go with this. I think Washington defense is going to be draftable this year in fantasy. They're going to be putting up a lot of points, and I think this is going to help a lot with this offense. They have been missing short fields. When they do get short fields, it's immense. It helps out a lot, and that we could have seen that a lot last year. So hopefully,
I mean,
it translates.
just go back to week 18 last year with Sam Howell against Dallas. What made him so successful throughout that game? Turnovers and short fields.
Yep.
I mean,
You're absolutely right, Hall. Right on the tip there, Giggity. Now the next question from Tim Towner in the Discord chat server. Look at the entire draft class and tell me if Ron Rivera did enough to help his young quarterback. I do think he did enough to help his quarterback. I think that what we just talked about is a lot to do with that. Like we just talked about the turnovers, and that's what he went out and got. 2 playmakers on the outside, a blue chip playmaker and Jartavius Martin. Then you have the lockdown corner in Emmanuel Forbes. Seals you up long term, but also helps you in getting those turnovers and creating the short field. And then off of that, vice versa, getting Ricky Stromberg. We heard Ryan Fowler talk about the X's and O's being on the whiteboard, really impressing scouts and coaches. So he's a smart football player. What's one of the best things about Chase Rouillet? He's a smart football player. He gets guys set up. He knows where everyone needs to go. That's what Ricky Stromberg brings in, and that's what this kind of team is needed, because when Larson's in the game, they win. When Rouillet's in there, that offense is humming. So adding that kind of piece is pivotal. So I think that's more important than anything. So I do think that Ron Rivera helped his young quarterback. I just think that we have to think outside the box when addressing that issue, Tim.
yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that, if you just look at the draft solely, you could be like, did they do enough? Yeah, they got some depth linemen that can project to be starters, maybe middle of the season or somewhere down the line. But if you just look at the whole offseason as a whole, like you already have the weapons, you already have the running backs in the running game. You add Eric Bieniemy and what he's going to bring to this offense and how he's going to spread the offense out, put players in space, pretty much use Sam Howell as not like a Pat Mahomes type of like quarterback, but just like a point guard in basketball where he's going to distribute to the playmakers, let them do the rest. And then if you yeah, like I said, if you just go based off the draft and you're looking at just, they drafted a couple linemen that might not be week 1 starters, then you would say no. But if you look at the totality of it, like you said, you think outside the box and you say, well, they added Eric Bieniemy, the receiving core is already set. You got Brian Robinson coming back. You got Antonio Gibson with what seems like a offensive coordinator that's going to actually get him involved more in the passing game, kind of like week 1 in Jacksonville. And then you mentioned the turnovers. You go back to week 18 last year. Fumbled punt, turnovers, interceptions, fumble recoveries, short field for Sam Howell. That resulted in points. That was like one of our most efficient, best offensive games that we had throughout the whole entire season. So I definitely think that Yeah, just overall totality of the offseason, they've added. If you just look at the draft solely, just like in a linear draft, like who they drafted, you can kind of pick and choose, like did they? But like I said, overall totality of the offseason, I think they did.
Such a crazy draft, man. It's weird to be here today after it. It's just so crazy. Now, the next question from Tim Towner Hall: do you think Ron Rivera was aggressive enough in the draft, and would you have done things differently?
Well, if you listen to Martin Mayhew, he'll tell you himself that he admitted that he wished they were a little bit more aggressive and trading up. And I was listening to Gray and Danny before I got on here earlier, and he was saying that people inside that he talked to inside the building said that they were trying to trade up at some point, like from 47 to I think 42, 43, wherever Steve, what's his last name,
Avila, yeah.
Steve Avila, wherever he got drafted at by the Rams. I think it was 42, somewhere around there. They're going to try to trade up. They had an offer on the table, and then Sean McVay and Les Snead and the Rams swooped into the last second, pretty much stole the deal off the table from Washington, and they ended up drafting him. So I think that they, like Martin Mayhew said, they wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, but at the same time, I'm actually glad that they weren't, because although they might have gotten the player that they targeted higher on their board, as opposed to maybe Stromberg dropping to them in the third round, I definitely think that by not giving up draft capital for 2024, say the quarterback position doesn't work out, well, now we got a little bit more draft capital to add on top of whatever we might need next year to maybe move up to get a quarterback. So I'm happy what they did, happy where they're at. I know they did trade up here and there, like I think in the 5th round or something like that, or 4th round maybe, but they didn't give up much to get to that spot. So I'm happy where they're at. I like the more aggressive like style of like off season and front office and drafting, but I also just looking at the vision, like Ryan, like Fowler said, had they stuck to their board and stuck to their guns, I'm completely okay with that.
Well, I don't think that they needed. I do think they were aggressive enough in the sense that they went out and got their guy. They went out and got the ones that they felt confident in, right? And I feel like Ron Rivera does deserve respect in the fact that they went with the guy, Emmanuel Forbes, that was not the consensus national media pick. They went with what they wanted, right? And they knew how it was going to look if they didn't draft Chris Gonzalez, but they did it anyway. And I do think that deserves a lot of respect. So I think the aggressiveness in that standpoint deserves respect. Would I have done anything differently? No, because let's say you do trade up for Steve Avila or Matthew Bergeron there in that second round. Who to say that means that KJ Henry pick is there or that Andre Jones pick is there in the 7th round? We're all looking at it now and saying it's really smart that they did that because now they have fundamental backups for Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Would that have been there if we had to make that trade up in the 2nd round? So is that really helping you? In a sense, is the overall team standpoint just by going up and get that guard when you got Ricky Stromberg in the 3rd, so to speak. You know what I mean? And so I do think that they were aggressive enough, and I would not have done anything differently, so to speak. I think that they did things the correct way. Like, I'm not blaming them for their draft class at all. I'm more so blaming myself for not being able to see it. Right? Like being able to know, because I feel like us sitting in these chairs doing this show, we should be a conduit between team and fan, and we should be able to speak coach for them to be able to make things easier and get the lines less muddied, make it more clear. And I felt like we failed that. And I personally did after, because I do all the film breakdowns and everything, but I wouldn't do anything differently. I think that they did exactly what they wanted to do, and I'm feeling damn confident about this defense. I wanted early on a lockdown corner. They went and got it, and they added another playmaker to this defense. Finally, this defense is able to be at its complete capacity. Being able to play press man so Daniel Jones can't just sit back and dink and dunk all the way down the field. They can play press, allow Chase and Montez more time to get after the quarterback so they can get the ball out in a second. This really does expand the defense a lot.
Yeah, I think Forbes is going to be what everyone thought William Jackson was going to be last year when we signed him, and we're like, we finally got that lockdown corner. Right. He likes to take the ball away. He's aggressive, and he just never panned out. Whereas I think Forbes is like almost like the perfect fit for this defense, because when you got the front four up there actually like doing work and rushing, and when your front four is in sync with your back four, I mean, that's like perfect defensive symphony right there. Like if your front four is getting after the passer and making him get the ball out quick, well, then you got Emmanuel Forbes, who specializes in taking the ball away. So, and is lucky to have all these interceptions. But like they always say, you make your own luck. And People always talk about how one of his greatest assets, Forbes, is above the head, above the neck, where he just like such a film guy, such a study guy. He likes to study what the offensive coordinator likes to do, the receivers' routes, the combinations and whatnot. So he's not. You can call it lucky, but I call it great preparation to put yourself in a great spot to make yourself lucky.
Yeah, I just think I said this on Twitter. It's not Emmanuel Forbes' fault that he has better hands than the receivers that he's guarding against. You know, if the ball pops up, is that Emmanuel Forbes' fault that he caught it? Like, oh yeah, you have 6. Yeah, he caught the football. What do you want him to do, man?
Mike Leach, R.I.P. to Mike Leach, the Mississippi State coach that was there, the creator of the air raid offense, who knows a little thing about receivers and passing the ball.
It's true.
He wanted Emmanuel Forbes to play receiver as well as defensive back in Mississippi State. So that should tell you how great of hands he actually has.
Yeah, so you guys could playing all day, say they're easy interceptions. I just say he has better hands than most wide receivers that he's guarding.
And the dude threw 95 miles per hour like as a pitcher in high school, which is like,
and I'm telling you, have you ever had to bat against a 95-mile-an-hour fastball?
Dog, I went against
I've
like
had to do it in high
80.
school, dude. And dude, that shit is on a line, bro.
I've gone against someone that threw like 85, like almost like low, like almost like 90, like high 85, like 87, 88. And I was legit like scared for the first couple of pitches. Like, dog, if this dude hits me, I might have a couple broken ribs. So like for 95-mile-per-hour fastball to come at you, I'm good on that.
Dude, it's pretty gnarly. We went against a kid who ended up getting drafted by the Mets, if I'm not mistaken, in high school against Gaithersburg. Safe to say we lost that game, but that's not important. Last question we have from Scott Hartley in the UK. Oi, thank you, Scott.
Oi.
Now the draft is over. What moves do you see us making in restructured contracts or cuts? Fuller, Norwell, Thomas, and Rouillet would be prime candidates. What are your thoughts? Keep up the great work. Can't wait to see you all soon, brother. And Mike Reed, we have to meet up this time. Good luck with that, Scott. Good luck.
I was going to say, good luck with that one, but
we can't even get him to show up here.
Right. No, but as far as cuts, I know Logan Thomas, everyone was on the Logan Thomas radar. I've been saying from the get-go, he's going to be here week 1. He'll be the starter, and it looks like that's the way it's going to be, pending some crazy circumstances that happen between now and week 1. But Chase Rouillet, I think with them getting Nick Gates and drafting I just forgot his name, 3rd round, Ricky Stromberg. Yeah, I think that you can probably Ricky. You can probably chuck the deuces to Chase Rouillet. Kendall Fuller definitely is going to be on the. I think he's going to replace Logan Thomas as far as like the one to watch for, because, like you said, drafting Emmanuel Forbes, drafting Martin, who can play the inside, play the slot. It's almost kind of like I would like to keep Fuller around because I feel like we need that kind of older vet in the room to like kind of like keep everybody together. But I could definitely see why they do it. And you save, I think it was like $4, $6, $8 million post June 1 or something like that. So I could definitely see him being a June 1 casualty as well.
Logan, I definitely expect Logan Thomas to restructure his contract. Chase Rouillet, I would expect a restructure. I don't want to cut ties with Chase because he's a very good player. I want to be able to see
I don't. I would love for them to restructure, but it takes 2 to tango for the restructure.
You're absolutely right, and I think that coming off injury, it'd be smart for him to do so, so to speak. Kendall, I'm not really sure what's going to go on with Kendall because I do think that Kendall is productive in the sense of what he can provide you in the zone, kind of, and as a vet coming in as maybe a slot guy or coming to safety, sort of combination of secondary movement. I think Kendall is helping you there. The big question is Norwell and how they see these guards play. And because, obviously Cosme, they have Sadiq Charles, they have Chris Paul, they just drafted Ricky Stromberg, they have Nick Gates, and then they also just brought in Braden Daniels. So not really sure what's going to go on there. So if I would, unfortunately, Andrew Norwell, if I'm going to pick anybody to possibly cut, probably him.
I feel like they like the more, like, obviously they like the athletic kind of like linemen,
right?
And they can get out in space and move. And Norwell, obviously at this point in his career, is not that guy at all.
No, not at all. Oh, he was injured last season, so please give him some respect in that regard. I'm sure that he is a good athlete. Who am I? I'm a stick.
Of course, he's a good athlete, but I'm just talking about NFL athlete terms. At this point in his career, like, he's not going to be as athletic as Daniels or Cosme or something like that. Right. Even Chris Paul at this point, maybe. So.
Yeah, that's right. All right, everybody. That's going to wrap us up for this episode. If you made it this far, you are a champion. I am your host, Kyle.
I could not talk today for some reason. I'm getting tongue-tied and everything left and right, but I'm home.
Talking about Emmanuel Forbes, that'll happen to you guys. I really appreciate everybody for including in. Thank you to Ian Cummings and Ryan Fowler for coming by and giving us their thoughts in this draft class. It was invaluable. All right, everybody, we will see you again on Thursday, hopefully with Reed this time. I'll kidnap him if I have to. Just don't let him know ahead of time. It's more successful in that sense. All right, everybody, we'll see you on Thursday. Washington football. Woo! Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Kyle. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and if you liked what you saw, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you get notified when anything new is uploaded to the channel. Also, we just launched theburgundyzone.com. You can go there and find all of our latest news, articles, and the latest episodes that are uploaded. Again, we also have the Discord chat server, where all of our VIP folks are in, like Andy Burrows, Scott Hartley, Sergio Martin is in there as well. Don't miss out on the Discord chat server. Go and check that out. Until next time, everybody, Washington football. Woo!